Okay, sorry about that. So I'm gonna try and record this, but it seems like it's telling me my storage is too full, which that could be a problem. Sorry for all the technical difficulties, guys. This is my first time presenting one of these, and I was having a hard time getting in to the presentation, so that was a little problematic. But thank you for bearing with us, and well, me especially as a newbie. So welcome to my Doctor Who, How to Be a Time Management Lord webinar. I would like to start off by just getting the elephant out of the room and saying that, yeah, I'm a nerd. I like to watch shows with star in the title and read books basically, fairly all the time. Some of those books are things like Deep Work or Atomic Habits. So time management and sort of self-improvement are subjects that I enjoy reading about in my free time. I also did this course 4 years ago, and I've been working with, it was then M-Modal, it's now Acuity. I started doing that with my practicum, and I kept working with them until now. I'm actually still working with them part-time. So I thought for my first webinar, I could try combining some of my, side passion, hobby for time management and self-improvement stuff, but with, is anyone else having issues on their end? Someone's saying, oh, okay, so, I'm just gonna tell some people.
No, it's okay. You're okay. I never noticed anything.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. But I'm just going to type this for anyone who can't hear. I can try logging in and out again. But yeah, so anyway, this presentation is going to be sort of a synthesis of things I've learned working and also, just with that side hobby combined. So to start off, time management can be a bit of a misnomer. We all have 24 hours a day, 8 of which hopefully we're going to be spending, some amount of time unconscious for, leaving us about 16 to get the rest of the stuff we need to get done. And fitting that stuff in is actually usually more of an issue with focus, motivation, and energy. I like to think of these as sort of like systems, like the respiratory, cardiovascular, or GI systems that we deal with in the course. And they're the systems that we're going to look at when we're looking at diagnosing time management syndromes. So you can start by thinking about what are. Do you tend to procrastinate? Do you have trouble getting started? Are you easily distracted? Do you forget to do important stuff? Are you always rushing, feeling like you're underperforming? Do you feel impatient, indecisive, lazy? Do you end up doing everything yourself? Do you have trouble saying no? Do you end up feeling burnt out often? Any one of these symptoms could be caused by a problem with your focus, motivation, and or energy. So we're going to talk a little bit about some preventative medicine we can use for these different systems. I'm going to kind of start with the general topics of focus, motivation, and energy, and then I'm going to try and move those into the more specific areas of how we can apply those in the MT course and in later on in our MT work. I've also made up an Excel spreadsheet that I'll post on the forum along with this presentation later. So you can look over that and try using that for your own time management. And hopefully at the end too, or during, we'll get to some questions. I'll try and take a look at the chat if anyone has questions as we go, but if I miss anything, just don't be afraid to repeat it later on, because sometimes the chat moves very quickly. So starting with focus. Focus is really about managing distractions more than anything else. You want to be able to tune out or completely turn off your phone, your emails, text messages, social media, and even the people in your house can be huge distractions, as some of us know. Then there's also your internal distractions, your anxieties, worries, your list of to-dos and things that you're planning, your daydreams, your fantasies, all that stuff can be distracting. So one of the best ways to deal with those distractions is boxing them into specific times and places when you can deal with them. If you can set times outside of your workday to check your phone, inbox, social media, especially social media, that's something you really want to save for the end of the day, if you can. You can also make a to-do list that you look over in the mornings and or at the end of the day, so that anytime you kind of get into that planning head, you can kind of just make a quick note and get back to work if anything comes up, but hopefully keep that sort of planning thinking to outside of work hours. You can also, this sounds silly, but make time to daydream. If you are a chronic daydreamer, you can set aside, you know, say an hour after work or some time before bed to just let your mind wander. You can do this when you go for a walk or when you're driving around. Just sort of mentally make note that that's the time that you're going to do that thing. I also like to keep a little sticky note, usually digital one, of what I call interest things. We'll play on interestings. Because while I'm working, sometimes I'll come across something that I go, oh, that's interesting. But I want to keep working, so I sometimes just copy over links, or I'll just make a note of whatever that thing is, and then at the end of the day I can go back and look up, you know, more in detail about whatever that thing that caught my attention was. So all of these boxes that you're using, they leave you time to create focus time for you to get your work done. Now, why is that important? Well, if you've ever heard of something called the flow state, or a lot of us just call it being in the zone, this is the state where you can perform tasks and you're just fully immersed, you're energized, you're focused, you have full involvement, and you're enjoying the process, the activity that you're engaged in. In essence, this is complete absorption. You kind of lose time and you just get into that zone or that flow. The researcher who first coined this term, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I'm really sorry to any Hungarian listeners right now for that pronunciation, but he also defined this spectrum that you see of mental states based on the challenge level of the activity and the skill level of the person engaging in it. So how we can sort of apply this is as a bit of a diagnostic tool. As you're working, if you start feeling really anxious or worried and you're kind of getting into that heightened state, it might be because the difficulty level you're working at is a little bit ahead of where you are right now in your skill set. So you can do a couple things to try and drop that down a bit. I'm going to talk a bit more about that later, especially as it pertains to reports. And on the other side of the spectrum, if you're feeling bored, you can start thinking about how you can challenge yourself. That might mean, you know, you try and move through your dictations quicker, or you try and delve a little bit deeper in some of the medical terms you're researching when you're in the theory portion. just any way you can challenge yourself will up your focus by capturing more of your attention. So the next thing we're going to talk about is motivation. This system is tied directly with procrastination in ways we often don't think about. And the main reason we often don't think of it is the thing behind motivation is usually outside of our awareness, even though it's right there in the name. Emotions. Your motivations are tied directly to your emotions. When we don't feel any motivation, it's usually because there's some underlying negative feeling we have about doing something. If we're feeling bored or anxious, like I touched on in the last section, or frustrated or impatient with our progress because maybe we've been setting really high expectations, and if we fail to meet those expectations, disappointment sets in. Doubts can arise then about our abilities, and who really wants to have their doubts confirmed, right? So this is why we start procrastinating, because we're doubting our ability to do something, so we don't want to start doing it. Once you're in this cycle, it can be really hard to break out of, but there is a way out. And honestly, it's going to sound a little bit corny, especially if you're in a negative state of mind. But the main way out is that you're going to try and cultivate joy. I told you it was going to sound corny. So that's a lot easier said than done, especially if you're in a negative state. How do you get to enjoying something if you're feeling crappy about it? Most of us will either just avoid doing that thing, or we'll try and brute force our way into doing it just through sheer discipline. Either of those is a bad idea, because if you try and just force yourself to keep working through when you're feeling negatively about something, you're reinforcing those bad feelings and you're just draining yourself emotionally. On the other hand, if you're getting into the avoidance cycle, you can start doing things like checking social media, and that's also really dangerous because social media has some dopamine rewards and it's kind of low effort, so you're actually kind of rewarding yourself with instant gratification for avoiding your work. So you're setting up a really bad reward loop that is going to make it even harder to get working. So how do we get out of the negative headspace? Well, to neutralize those negative feelings rather than go all the way over to positive is usually more effective, because when you're thinking negatively, I don't know about you, if I'm in a bad mood, I don't want to hear cheery advice. I don't want to hear to lift my chin up or put a smile on my face, because that really doesn't sound very nice when you're in a bad mood, right? So I usually just try and get to neutral instead. And one of the ways you can do that is to examine those negative feelings. There's this technique in meditation called naming or labeling, where you try to state exactly what it is you're feeling. Some experienced meditators can take this technique really far and even learn to relieve itchy spots by just directing their attention there. You don't need to be able to do this for this to help you. At this stage, you really can just label that emotion, because our emotions often grow stronger when we try to ignore or repress them. Kind of like a kid that's being ignored is going to get louder and louder. Our emotions will do the same thing. So sometimes it helps to just name it, put a label on it, and pay it some attention. Say to yourself, oh, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I'm feeling really angry. I'm feeling sad. And, recognize that state. And then from there, you can kind of start to think about, well, why am I feeling this way? Have I set some really high expectations? Why am I setting those? Would I set those expectations for a friend or someone I know? Well, if I wouldn't do that, then why am I doing that to myself? Are you starting to doubt your abilities or feel anxious? if you're in that state, it might be a good idea to reach out to some other people, like the instructors, or if you have any friends or family who have done this work. Just knowing that other people have felt the same way you're feeling can sometimes really help, just to get out of that negative loop, because you realize that you're not alone. Other people have felt this way too, and it's not something wrong with you. It's just part of the human condition that sometimes we, set ourselves up for anxiety or disappointment. Another thing you can try is a technique of just simply noticing. It's another meditative technique, and rather than trying to do a full meditation practice, all you're doing is just bringing your attention and awareness into your immediate environment for a little bit. What you see, what you're feeling, what you're hearing, noticing if your chair is comfortable, what the temperature of the room is like, whether or not you can take a nice full breath. These basic things around you can really help return your mind to a neutral place that isn't positive or negative, because they are kind of neutral things. Your chair isn't happy or sad, right? So you can spend a few moments just being like the chair and just be for a little bit. Another sort of concept that I want to present to you is the concept of how your expectations can sort of play out. So if you've ever heard of compound interest with investing, you know that there's sort of a curve. It's not a linear rate of rise. There's a point where it just is going to start shooting up, right? But when we're doing something like developing a skill or learning something in a course like this, we often have expectations that the effort we put in is going to kind of come back in this linear, stepwise fashion. But that's not always reality. Sometimes what's actually happening is these skills you're developing take a little bit of time to coalesce, and then you will start hitting that curve where it starts to get better and better for you. But until you hit that lovely curve, you are in this valley of disappointment, which is where your expectations are higher than the actual reality of your progress. So that is not a fun place to be, but again, it kind of helps if we just recognize that this is a discrepancy between, what our brain is sort of geared to think and what reality actually ends up being. So once we've done some work to neutralize those acidic feelings, how do we cultivate joy in what we're doing? Well, one of the first things is think about your motivations for becoming an MT. We all have different reasons, but I'm pretty sure all of us really like the idea of working from home. Maybe you want to learn more about medicine, diseases, the human body. If you enjoyed biology or chemistry in school, or English and grammar, maybe you just like the way medical transcriptionist sounds. There's nothing wrong with that. I personally kind of enjoy correcting doctors on their grammar. It might sound a little petty, but hey, it keeps me from doing it to my loved ones when I'm outside of work. And, it's enjoyable to do while I'm working. You can also review your goals. That can definitely help. What is it you want to get done this week, today, even this hour? Well, and while you're saying those goals, it's important to remind yourself to give them some room. Hold on to them lightly. Think of it like a little bird. You want to give it some space to adapt to reality and let go of any of the expectations that are going to make it unreasonable or unpleasant for you to meet those goals. And finally, think about, like, if we bring back that noticing exercise, try noticing what you enjoy in the moment when you're working. Are you enjoying learning new things, new medical terms? I really love anatomy for whatever reason, so I love whenever that comes up. Are you enjoying researching or sometimes listening? Does the person speaking have a pleasant or funny voice? I have some doctors that, like, I like the way they talk because they have funny or cheery ways of talking. Yeah, someone said typing. It can be really fun to see your typing speed get quicker or practice that. Thank you, Rita. Do you enjoy being in your home? You can take your lunch whenever you want to. You don't have to commute. You can wear whatever you want. You can show up with crazy hair or, no makeup or crazy makeup if you want. It's a nice environment to work, right? And if you can shut the door, you can also be able to have some privacy while you work too, which can be nice. So moving on to energy. This is really how much fuel you have in the tank. We've all probably heard about circadian rhythms, but just for a quick recap, it's the natural process that regulates your sleep-wake cycle. And what that means is that you also have different times of the day when you're going to be more or less alert. This is going to vary based on your personal habits, but you can use this concept to sort of ask yourself where your most productive times will be. What time of day do you feel the most alert, the most energetic, the most sluggish? Are you a morning person? Could you be one? I asked that last question because I've been a night owl for most of my life, but in the last couple of years, I actually discovered that I can be a morning person if I give myself some time to wake up and don't try and dive into work straight away. If I do things like splash some water on my face, or for a while I was sitting in front of a sunny window to get some extra vitamin D during the winter as my first thing in the morning while I sip some tea. And sometimes I also like to just put on a song I really like and dance around, and that can be a great way of kickstarting your, metabolic and circulation systems to get those involved. Fortunately, I can shut the door so no one has to see my silly dancing, but it just helps me get to the computer with a bunch of energy. So those are ways I found to help, wake up in the morning. But you can also use a smaller, quicker version of these as a break. If most people enjoy showering first thing in the morning, but if you're taking a break to go to the bathroom, just splashing some water on your face for a couple extra seconds can be a great way of refreshing yourself through the day. If you're taking a tea break, go stand in front of a window that has some sun if you can get it. I mean, we don't get a lot of it up here, so get it when you can. If you have some time to do those noticing exercises, even just 5 minutes of noticing your breath can really refresh your brain. Exercise, gain that circulatory system involved again. Silly dancing or just stretching around, get that blood pumping, and you'll have more oxygen reaching all your body parts and all your brain cells, and that'll really refresh your mind so that you can work better. Another silly thing I like doing is, don't ask, I don't even remember where I picked this one up, but I started doing this thing where if I'm really frustrated, I go to a mirror and I let myself have a little tantrum. it sounds silly, but like it lets me express my frustration in a physical way, and that can be a nice cardiovascular exercise. But it also ends up with me laughing at myself because I can't do this for long without starting to giggle at how silly I'm being. And, laughter really, really does just feel like you've completely flipped over. And yeah, it's so therapeutic. It really is. And even forcing laughter, I definitely got that one from a book called Laughter Yoga, which is a great read. But yeah, just forcing yourself to laugh will usually lead to real laughter after a bit. So if you think about it, give that a try, and just dare to be silly for a little bit, because it can really refresh your brain, help you work. And if all else fails, good old water and healthy snacks are always a great way to put some more fuel in your tank. Next concept I kind of want to go over is what I like to call playing with a full deck. And this is something I kind of coined when years ago when I was in another career and working way too much. I started over-relying on my after-work drink as my stress relief, and it started to grow a bit. And at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I need some other things to do after work to get rid of this stress, because, alcohol, is great in moderation, but once it starts getting to be too much, you have after effects, right, that are now adding to your stress, and who needs that? So thinking about some other things that you can do like that way there you can kind of use them in conjunction. You're welcome, Rita. Instead of just, the alcohol, like I started really enjoying herbal teas at the end of the day, and finding some really tasty, fruity ones. My partner really likes these Italian sodas that he sometimes makes fresh fruit syrups that he can put into them. So you can find other drinks to replace those. You can find tasty things that you like eating to replace junk food. If you're looking for endorphin releasers, I love London Fog. Yeah, sorry. They're great. Especially Rooibos London Fog if you don't want caffeine at the end of the day. Oh, so good. Yeah. But yeah, for other things to release endorphins, exercise is great for doing that, and maybe not at the end of the day, because if you do it too close to bed, you might have a hard time getting sleep. Sugar-free baking. That's interesting. Music. We know that listening to music that you enjoy will also release endorphins, and that can be a great stress relief. And, if you enjoy reading books or listening to podcasts, some of these things are really great to do right after work. So if you do decide to have your glass of wine and Netflix later, you've done a bit more so that you can actually enjoy that relaxation time a bit more. And also, any of these things you can fit into, let's say you have to break up your workday and you have a chunk in the middle where you can't quite start working yet, but you want to do something in between there, picking up a book or some knitting or a coloring book for hobbies that you can do on the side. Those can be really great ways to sort of refresh in between. So now I just want to go over, make this a bit more general. move from general to more specific. And if you look up time management strategies, you're going to see these are the perennial favorites that you'll find ad infinitum if you look this up. So I want to take these concepts and move them more specifically towards what we do. And the first thing we need is to pull some metrics. So in the overview section, there's that MT-HDS detailed curriculum. And if you look at that nice handy table that has the number of dictations and estimated hours to complete and estimated days to complete, what I pulled was right from the bottom, the estimated hours to complete, and just divided that by the days. And that gives me 3.22 hours per day to finish the course in 1 year with no time off whatsoever. So then I took that number again and I said, well, let's divide that by 50 weeks. I'm going to start by giving you 2 whole weeks off because I'm just that nice. And with that, we end up with 23.5 hours per week to finish the course in a year. You can then take that and divide it over 5 days. And with that, you get 4.7 hours a day if you want to work a 5-day week. Obviously, this is going by the time estimates that are handed down from on high in the course, and your own times might vary. But it's a good starting metric. So if you're spending 4 or 5 hours a day and you're falling behind, it might be time to look at how you're managing your time. And going back to what we were saying earlier, that might be about managing distractions, emotions, or the fuel you're running on, right? So the other metric I'm going to look at is the method of evaluation. And this one's pretty simple. Just take a look there and see if anything jumps out at you. You know, like if you're looking at those numbers, there's a really high one, isn't there? Those pies are worth 3/4 of your mark. That's a lot. And they get heavier and heavier as we go. So this isn't a random thing, just so you guys know. The instructors didn't get together and say, hey, how can we make the students freak out? It's actually based on the fact that a lot of companies will ask you to do something that's going to look a lot like those proficiency exams that might involve some theory questions and will often, almost to employer or to a place, are going to involve doing some dictations so that they can see how you do the job. So that's why we weighted the course that way. But it's a good thing to know and review just so that you can prioritize how you're doing your time, right? Because you know, a lot of students, they get really hung up on the chapter dictations and they're only worth 5% of your whole mark. So don't be afraid to make some mistakes there. So if you want to manage your time, you need to know when you have it, right? The first thing you can do is use what some people call a time finder. And it's a really simple exercise where you just sit down for 5 minutes every night for a week and write down everything you did during the day in half-hour increments from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And this will just give you sort of a nice overview of where you might be able to fit in chunks of work. This will help you figure out where you could make office hours for yourself. And, you know, if you look at your week and you have 5 spots where you can fit in 5 hours, that's great. That's ideal. If you need to break it up more, you can do 2.5-hour blocks, or you can think of even like breaking it, you know, down really, really far and say, okay, I need to find where to fit in 50 half-hour chunks in my week. That's 25 hours. So that's giving you some cushion time. The one thing I'll say about the half-hour blocks is do try to find as many spots as you can for 1.5 to 2 hours, because that's usually where you will actually be able to get more productive, because you'll have a bit more time to get into the flow of things and focus, and you sort of get warmed up to what you're doing. The other great thing about knowing these metrics of how much time you're going to need is these office hours can be ways that you can talk to the people in your house and sort of barter some time for yourself. It's a lot easier to advocate for your needs if you know what they are, and the more specific, the better. And just on a side note too, when you are talking to the people in your home, just because you're at home doesn't mean you're going to be available all the time. We all want to give attention to our loved ones, but when people start to expect your immediate attention, it's a problem. You are allowed to set limits and boundaries on when you're available and when you need time for yourself, because you have, many things that are important in your life. It doesn't mean you love anyone any less. It just means that you value yourself as well and your own interests. So, but it can feel a lot better to advocate for yourself if you know very specifically, okay, this is the amount of time I need, and this is where I'm going to fit it in. And then if you can turn those into office hours that you can post somewhere, that's a really good way of, making it more official. And just for another side thing too, when you're trying to find nice chunks of time, especially during the day at certain times, the other thing you can use us as an excuse. Use the instructors. Tell people in your house that you need whatever it is, like 2 hours between 8 and 4 Pacific time, where you need to be able to call us or talk to us, or we need to be able to call you, and that like you need that to be uninterrupted time where you can do that. So yeah, definitely use us as an excuse whenever you need to. Tell them we're going to call you at 2 if you need that time, that time off of people outside of your house. So when we're breaking down the things you have to do with each chapter, you have, on the theory portion of things, your readings and exercises and tests for each chapter. And from that, you're going to pull your word lists and expanders, create some references for yourself, and hopefully have some time for webinars, QA, and chatting with us if you need, to ask us questions or clarify things. On the practice end of things, we have the dictations that we're going to use that 3-pass method on, and then reviewing the feedback you get from instructors and also your self-grading. The practical component can't be understated. You're developing not just your typing skills, but your listening ear, your researching skills, and contextual thinking. That's the kind of thinking that's going to let you know that a doctor probably said palpitation and not palpation based on the context. So these are all muscles you're training, kind of like a soccer or violin player training to get better. They can sit around and read about gameplay or music theory all they like, but if they don't spend enough time kicking the ball or playing the violin, they're not going to be very good, right? So how we get better as MTs is by practicing medical transcription. Shocking, I know. But if you've ever tried to learn an instrument, you know that you don't just play a song once when you practice it. You go over it multiple times, slower, faster. You break it down into components. You zero in on spots that are giving you trouble. It's the same idea with dictations. You can try and think of each report like a song, and our 3-pass method as a way of learning that song. The first pass is just you simply listening to the report to get the whole picture. You wouldn't try playing a song you've never heard once, right? So then the second pass is where we listen and type. And the third pass is kind of like if you're a vocalist and you're singing the song on your own for the first time to really hear your own voice. Instead of playing the report a third time, if you read it out loud, it's a lot easier to pick up on grammar errors, contextual issues like, hey, wait, why did the doctor say a medication instead of a diagnosis here? I should probably flag that. And punctuation. When we get our reports back, it's like hearing a recording of a musical performance. You're going to get feedback from your instructors, your musical coaches, in this analogy, that you then want to go into the report to hear for yourself. I used to replay the same spot in the audio where I got an error until I could hear what I was reading in the answer key, and it really did make my reports sound clearer and clearer the more I did this. But I unfortunately started employing that a bit late in the game. So I didn't get to get the full value of that, but better late than never. And then the self-graded reports are like recordings you're going over yourself to make notes on your performance. You want to try and think like your coaches, us instructors, but don't get caught up in matching our marking exactly, because that's a really deep rabbit hole to go down. You want to get the thinking behind the errors, not necessarily just the numbers. So when the heck do you have time for all this? If you're looking at that 10-to-1 ratio we give you for reports, you actually should be able to use a 5-to-1 ratio for the 3 passes. And then you should have time after that for proofing it, going over to fill in blanks, doing research, and then also for listening to the report when it comes back with the key. If you aren't able to get to that, it's probably because of, you're not getting through those 3 passes quick enough. And what's going to help you with that really is having some desk references that you can look at. If you look over at your account specifics or punctuation guide, having a quick 2-page reference, like I took a screenshot of my own down in the left bottom corner there. And you can make these by just going to the document and taking out all the extra information like the examples and trying to redact them as much as possible until you get them into a nice format that you can just glance over at the computer really quickly. With the dangerous abbreviations and your grading notes, you can do kind of the same thing by putting it into an Excel spreadsheet and using, or even a Word table, just to sort of organize that information, make it something that you can just refer to really, really quickly. For getting through your reports too, the other method you can use is this snowball method that I'm taking from finance. It's originally a way of getting rid of debt. And the whole idea is that you attack the smallest things first so that you have more and more resources to apply to the bigger things. So if you listen to your whole pool of dictations, which are going to be about half an hour to an hour total time before the first PI, and then after that they get longer, it's more like 1 to 2 hours. You can make a list and put down the dictation length and its number in your pool. And then as you're listening, just make some little notes for yourself. Is the audio clear? Are the terms familiar? Is the format new or unfamiliar to you? And then you can go through that list and highlight all the shortest ones and the easiest ones, and then on the other side, the longest and hardest ones. And from that, you can create sets for yourself. And where this gets to be really nice is then you can attack those short and sweet ones. And sometimes in a really big pool of dictations, you could get 20 reports done or more on, like, if they're all really quick, short ones. And then by the time you're tackling those really hard ones, you have more experience, and you're also, you've heard some terms that maybe someone said a lot clearer. So yeah, sometimes the short ones are really hard. So you can put that in a sort of middle pool. And yeah, that's why listening to them ahead of time is kind of a good idea, because the more times you listen to it, the better. And the other thing too is that you can use that listening to them as something you do at the end of the day or before bed. It can be kind of part of a downtime, or even something you do to prep for work too. So that could be part of your routine. And when you're trying to make a routine for yourself as a student, yeah, the pre-typed ones can be good for that too, but sometimes they can also lead you astray if the speech rec throws in some curveballs at you. But yeah, so breaking down a routine you can use, it's not a bad idea to think of warming up to what you're doing. And that can be just going over the overview in the online course section, or you can also just look over your pool and set some goals for yourself, which we're going to remember not to make unreasonable. And then also you can review some of the documents that you're using, like your references, your account specs, punctuation guide. You can review some readings. Maybe you've made some notes for yourself, word lists, all that fun stuff. You could watch some webinars, or there's some great YouTube channels like Chubby Emu or MedLife Crisis, which can be fun to look at as ways of warming up or even cooling down after work. And then, you can get into your main practice, your chapter readings, the exercises, the dictations with that 3-pass method, self-grading. Yeah, it's a funny name, eh? Self-grading, grading reports. And I like to usually save things like chapter tests or harder dictations for once I've sort of gotten into the right headspace and warmed up a bit. And then after your workday, you can kind of just go over stuff, think about the references you're using, review some feedback as a nice cool down part of your day. And if you don't have a big chunk to do this all in, like you don't have a 5-hour block, you can break this up and do some prep and practice in the morning, and then some other sort of chunks of practice later on the day, and save some of the stuff that you would do to close out the day for like your evening time. It really depends on when you can fit this into your schedule. So there are some skills that, these skills that you're developing now, they can transfer over when you're working. So those time exercises can help you with having office hours. Those desk references you're making now, you're going to be doing those with account specs and QA review later too. Warming up. When I started working with Mmodal, one of the things I would do warm up sometimes is just listen to my first report at 2 times speed, just because it would, I would see how much I could hear at that speed, and sometimes it would help me when I slow it down. It really helped me get through that report. When you're looking through your pool and breaking down, trying to estimate how long things are going to take you, you can think about that when you're working as how you're meeting your minimums for both, what your work is saying out and also your own personal budget, breaking it down that time. And then some of your cool down stuff that you're doing, you can transfer over to, just tasks you're going to have to do work-wise, like entering your pay codes or reviewing feedback. And then also, when you're asking us questions, just a side note I'd like to throw to you guys for a time-saving thing. You want to kind of preempt what our first responses are going to be, because this is going to help you a lot when you're working. If you're asking about something that you can find in your account specifics, or Acquity has a best practices document that they send out to all their employees, your employees aren't going to be really happy if the answers are in there. So, because, their time is limited, and if you can preempt them by saying, so I looked through the best practices and I looked over this section about leaving QA markers, but I'm still not clear on whether or not I should send it to QA for review. You want to format your questions to your employers with those references in mind, so that they think you've done your due diligence to answer it before you go to them. And that just really instills a lot of confidence in your employers, in your working abilities, in your researching abilities, and also shows that you value their time. So you can start doing that with us too, because the first things I'm always going to ask you is, well, what did you see when you looked in the BOSS? What did you see when you looked in your account specs? Because that's always got to be the first step for a lot of the questions. Or what did you find on Stedman's when you looked this up? I'm not asking that to be mean. I'm asking that because I want to get an idea of where, like, what the question behind the question you're asking is. Because if you ask me about capitalizing something, and I say, okay, so when you read the BOSS or your account specs, I'm citing those as examples because I'm trying to zero in on what is having a hard time sticking with you personally. So that's the reason we're getting into that. Now, I feel like I've already gone over time, and I don't know how much over time I can go with these things. Yeah, where's everyone at? Do you guys all have to take off, or do you want me to try and push through to some of the end things here? Okay, so I'll awesome. So I want to go into this section of it more, just so, yeah, exactly. So I do want to go over some of the worksheets I created, just so we can look at those. And let's start with this one. So actually, maybe I should start in the tools section. So I did a sample of the Time Finder, and that's just a really simple table of how you can go in and say, okay, that's when I got up today. You can say bathroom, whatever your morning ritual stuff is, if you want, and just make really quick notes for yourself. And what that's going to help you do is, you can even go in and, let's say, if I never get up before this, I can just say, do that to it. So, oh, actually, yes, I can. Is that better? Yeah, so if you're doing it this way, you can sort of block in, and then if you notice, like, okay, let's say I don't start work until later, and I have all this time where I'm not really doing anything. That that could be a time that I could see, okay, well, I have some time here that I could fit in a study block if I want. And let's say I get home, clearly this is a part-time job. I get home here and let's say it takes this long for my partner to get home, and then, but he can take over the kids once he's home, then maybe I have another block in here that I can go in and fill in and say, okay, this is where I have time. But the first thing you want to do is just take this sheet and every day this week, just put in these things so that you can see where you have time. And then I started making up a quick time management diagnostic sheet. So for the chronic symptoms, you can kind of go in and either, just mark something. Yeah, yeah, rainbow time. You can highlight them in different colors if it's something you think you do or you don't, or you could just delete the entry entirely if you say, oh, I never feel that indecisive, but I am always rushing around. You could highlight that and make it more important looking. And then for focus issues, if you're looking at distractions, you can write down, Facebook, Reddit, I don't know, whatever, and think about, yeah, Twitter, social media, think about saying, okay, for Facebook, I'm only going to check it after 8 p.m. And that's going to be what I'm going to try to do to, keep that boxed in somewhere else. Or maybe same thing for that one. And daydreams, maybe I can go for a walk and let my mind wander around. For motivation, oh yeah, Netflix. Definitely want to save that one for later. For motivation issues, if you're thinking, those things we were talking about earlier, whether you're getting frustrated, anxious, bored, and how you're going to deal with that. So if you're getting frustrated, especially with the dictations, I always say just do a rough draft and save it till the end of the pool. So, and you might come up with some other things that work for you, and you can just kind of spitball some ideas here and think about how you're going to do that. For energy, if you, I don't know, have a afternoon crash, maybe the reason is that you eat really heavy lunch, so you want to lighten that up. Or maybe on the opposite end, you forget to eat lunch, so you want to remember to eat. Maybe you kind of get foggy through the day and you need to remember to drink more water. Yeah, if you get, if you know that you have times of day that are better than others, like you're more alert in the morning, that's when you want to try scheduling time. Right? So you can kind of use that to go through and think about what you're going to do to solve a bunch of these problems. So then the other thing I was looking at here is making some worksheets for how you can break up the course. So I like to do a year in weeks, and that way if I'm looking at that course and it says, okay, so I have 2 weeks to do skeletal, I can put that there and then put the next, I think the pies right after that, and see how long I want to take for that. So you can kind of just use that to take the chapters themselves and space them out according to how long you're going to have. And then there's a monthly planner you can use that you can put in just the dates up here, and also if you have holidays, sometimes I'll throw them in there, maybe a little bit. Oh, it's not liking my spacing. Yeah, you can use those to sort of block in how you want to divvy up big things like, let's say today I want to do the chapter readings and exercises. And I don't know why. If anyone's better at Excel than me, maybe you can tell me why it's doing what it's doing. But I might have to, okay, now it's actually reading. Yeah, you can go in and say, okay, I want to do the chapter stuff here. Okay, wrap text, I'll have to look into using that for the formatting. And yeah, so you can split up the theory. Let's say I want to take 2 days here, and then I want to start in on the dictations and get through as many as I can here, and then maybe I'll, depending on how many I have, throw in some more the next week. So you can think of the year one as each chapter by subject, like the skeletal, integumentary, musculoskeletal, I can type today, and put those in, plan those out that way. And then the month is kind of where you're taking each chapter and breaking them down, by each element that you're going to have to use, or sorry, which text sort of thing, or what's the word I'm looking for? Task-oriented things. And then I also made up a week schedule, which I just threw in a lot of times here so that you can take these and adjust them. So if you only get up at 7 in the morning, you can just delete those and move 7 a.m. up a little bit. I actually did kind of play around with one here where I did adjust the times more for when I'm usually able to start working and doing things. I haven't tried Google Calendar, but if you guys have better tools for this, what I'm kind of showing you more is how to break down. So whatever tool you can use for this, go for it. But just the idea that you can take a really wide look at what you're doing by taking the whole course material chapters and trying to see how you're going to fit that into a year, and then going month to month and saying, okay, now these are the tasks I have to do in each chapter, which I put over here as sort of recurring tasks that are going to come up over and over again. And those you can fit into your month, and then also think about taking them and sticking them in wherever you have these time blocks for yourself, and using it that way to sort of plan how you're going to do your day-to-day, week-to-week. So I can put that up with this webinar, and we've gone over time a little bit, but if anyone has any questions, I can try and get to that. Oh, good, Jenna. I hope it helps a little bit. It can be a very stressful course, especially the reason I want to address a lot of the emotional things in the beginning is, yeah, I was going to do the PDF as well, Sandy. But yeah, the reason I want to address the focus, motivation, energy things is that I found myself, my emotional state during this course really changed my productivity, and those frustrations that you get with dictators can really, really change how productive you can be. So yeah, I guess that's it for today, and thank you everyone for coming out and watching. And yeah, 2020 has been hard. It's definitely going to take some adjustment going forward. You're welcome, Christine. Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys. I hope you guys pulled some stuff you can use. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh, you too, Laura.